Hello everyone, welcome to Quilt in Color. My name is Shalina. Today I'm going to share with you the story of this Adinkra quilt. So sit back and enjoy. Let's get right to it. Hello everyone, this is Shalina. Welcome to my channel, Quilt in Color, where I talk about all things related to art. The story of this quilt starts with the purchase of some African fabrics. I was really excited to find that the NQA was having a quilting convention here in Columbus, Ohio, and I was able to go to one. In that convention, they had a booth that had African fabrics. It was the first time I'd seen them in a very long time, and I was really excited to see them. I was surprised that they'd be in a convention that was specifically related to quilting, because I never thought of using African fabrics for quilting, but I was really happy to find them. I bought some random fabrics that I liked without any regard to whether or not they matched each other or whether they would work together in one quilt. They only had one quilt that was there in the booth, and it was a quilt that was put together with a variety of African fabrics made with half square triangles. After I brought them home, I still didn't really know how I could use them, and so I had put them away. And then in 2016, Debby Kratovil presented this opportunity to make a block of the month quilt made with Adinkra symbols. And that was really exciting to me, and so I followed her blog every month and made those symbols. I basically just used the African fabrics and put a really simple background so that the fabrics could really shine through. I used fusible applique to make these symbols, and they were really quick to make. It was hard for me to patiently wait for the next month so that I could make the next block. When I printed out the pattern from her blog, I printed them too small. I didn't make sure that they were printing at 100%. And I really like the smaller size of the applique, and I'm really glad that I did choose a smaller size. It works better for me because I can use it as one of the quilts I put in the rotating display of quilts that I have over my couch. Eventually, she presented the alternate squares. Because I missized the applique, I had to resize the alternate blocks. I also made a mistake in the alternate blocks. I cut the wrong size for the center square, which meant that the size for the triangles would also have to be adjusted. I didn't realize that I had cut the center squares the wrong size, and so I made the triangles too big, which meant that all of my sharp points were lost, but I'm actually happy that I made that mistake because I like the way the block looks now. Adding the border fabric was the hardest one for me because I didn't have a lot of African fabrics, so choosing border prints just made it difficult. For the inner border, I had to use a variety of fabrics because I only had fat quarters and I didn't have a big piece of fabric that I could use to go all around the border. For the outer border, I had a limited number of fabrics that I could choose from that possibly were not African fabrics, but I think they do look good together even though I may be mixing cultures. To me, it's amazing as I look at the blocks of the quilt and how the quilt changed over time. The look of the quilt and the overall mood of the quilt changes a lot with each additional piece of fabric that is added. I think it's important to note that there is a history of colonialism with these fabrics, and they could be controversial. And my using the Adinkra symbols may also be controversial. Africa is a big continent, and it goes without saying that there are many different cultures in Africa, and these Adinkra symbols are part of one of the many cultures that are in Africa. And just like the symbols in each of the fabrics also are limited to that particular culture. Adinkra are symbols from Ghana in West Africa to represent concepts and aphorisms. They are used extensively in fabrics, logo, and pottery. They are incorporated into walls and other architectural features. The symbols have a decorative function, but they also represent objects that encapsulate evocative messages conveying traditional wisdom, aspects of life, or the environment. One of the things that come up when using symbols of another culture is the question of appropriation. Is it right for me to use these symbols in my quilts? And when I think about this question, I think there's three big questions that come to mind. The first question is it ethical? And most of that has to do with my intent. Is my intent to honor the culture, or am I making fun of it? And to me, I am honoring this culture, so my intentions are good in using these symbols. I was born in Africa, so it kind of honors my birthplace. The other question about ethics Am I profiting in any way that will take money away from people of the culture? For me, this quilt is very unique. I put a lot of myself and my own decisions into this quilt, and I don't think that I would be taking money away from anybody of that culture if I did sell the quilt, but I am not selling the quilt, so that makes me feel even better that it is ethical. Another question about the ethics is, would I be embarrassed if somebody from the culture saw it? Obviously, not everybody from the culture is going to feel the same way. Even though I don't have any evidence, I do think that the majority of the people of that community would be fine with me using these symbols in my quilt. The second group of questions I asked myself about appropriation, since I'm a member of a minority community, I asked myself how I would feel if somebody used the symbols of my culture to do this kind of work. If I thought that I would feel bad about something like that, then I would think that I should not be doing that to somebody else's culture. But I think that if I would be fine with it, then that's another clue to me that I can be fine with using somebody else's symbols the same way. And lastly, the third group of questions that I ask is, would I do this with other cultures without worry? I have made a quilt with Japanese symbols, and I use many English symbols in my quilts as well. I use the fleur-de-lis in the boundless quilt. And to me, if it's okay to use Japanese symbols and English symbols in the same way, I don't feel that I'm exploiting the culture. So I do think it's an important question that we do need to think about when we're creating these types of quilts. At the end, it's up to each person how they land on the answers to these groups of questions. I'm sure that not everybody will come up with the same answers that I did about the question of appropriation. I do feel that my heart is in the right place, and I do think that it is fine for me to use these symbols in this way. Curious to know, have you ever used symbols from another culture in your quilts? How do you feel about using symbols from other cultures in your quilts? What criteria do you use to avoid cultural appropriation? I had a lot of fun with the quilting on this quilt. For the Adinkra symbols, I just quilted around each of the symbol shapes. I made some simple designs on the alternate blocks. And then I had a lot of fun with the border in that I had seen a book called Doodle Stitching. And even though I hadn't read the book yet, I liked the idea of just doodling on the quilt. And so I doodled different designs all around the border. It was a lot of fun to do, and I'm sure I'll do that again. There's another African print in the binding. I found this blue backing that I really liked. It was also shiny fabric. All of the fabrics that I use in this quilt are shiny. They have a metallic thread in them, and I really like the way this quilt looks. I'm proud to have this quilt be one of the quilts that are in my collection. In my blog post, I made a list of the things that I learned in making this quilt. The first one was expanding the definition of what matches. Because I had a limited number of fabrics and I had bought them without considering whether they went together, I had to stretch my definition of what matches. This quilt has a lot of combinations that I wouldn't have thought to use together, but my limited selection of fabrics made me stretch, and I think that the result is fabulous. Another thing that I learned is that I really enjoyed combining the applique with the piecing. The applique and the quilting were my favorite parts. And the third thing that my blog says about what I learned about this quilt, when I first learned about free motion quilting, I thought it looked like doodling on fabric, but then I learned rules about not crossing the lines, and I saw a lot of videos about proper quilting designs and breaking the quilt into sections and choosing a different design for each section. And I lost the fact that I could truly doodle. I really truly doodled on this quilt, and it was exhilarating to be able to work from one section to another without a plan. And since I've written the blog post and to add some other things that I've learned about this quilt, when I went to Debbie's blog to give you the link for this pattern, I could not find it. And that's one thing that I've learned now, is that I should save more information about this. If the blog post disappears, then I still have that information. This quilt was started in 2016 and was finished in 2018. This video is one of a series of videos on this channel where I present to you each of my quilts one at a time. I hope that you subscribe to this channel if you haven't already done so that you can learn about each of the quilts. I appreciate all the support you've given me so far, and thank you for watching.